Welcome everyone to our first podcast or the second webinar that we're doing here at Space Refinery that covers the topics all around the teams and what makes them click and what supports their best work. Today we are with Tim Berghmans, partner at Amazing Cultures, who comes from a non-traditional background, tax specialist turned cultural expert through sectors like events, real estate, and marketing. And as a former COO at Marbles, he helped transform the agency from crisis to thriving by building a self-management organization where employees choose their own salaries, take unlimited leave, and trust replace traditional rules. And now Tim is at Amazing Cultures, who are supporting the amazing cultures in other teams as well, and help them build those ecosystems that make people feel like they can do their best work in those organizations. And today, indeed, we also wanted to talk about not only the culture itself, but everything that goes within it and what it means and how to apply it, how it can be connected to workplaces, specific physical workplaces, but also just the workplace in general, and then practical takeaways that you can take with you to support your team, improve your culture, and build stronger, more resilient companies. Yeah, Tim, welcome to this edition.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes. We connected over the conversation about culture, right? And how we could support each other, because Space Refinery works a lot with teams that already have in their DNA, in their core essence, the idea of innovating, growing together, developing something important for the world. And when they come to us and they want to improve their physical workplace, we take care of not only the actual design and how it looks, but also how it supports the team with their specific unique needs and the specific unique tasks within that specific team. So it's all very tailored. And with the conversation that we had with you, we also realized that indeed the cultures, while they can seem very ephemeral, but they're also very much aligned with the DNA of the company and their missions and their goals. So yeah, we talk a lot about the culture, but what does it actually mean? And can it be replicated, or can we go for Google culture and see how and apply it to us, or how should we approach it?
If you talk about culture or the way you can look at culture, you could also look at yourself as, can I just be somebody else? It's hard as an individual to say, oh, I want to be like Mick Jagger, or I want to be like Obama. You can say it and you can be inspired by those persons and try to become another version of yourself with influences of them, but you can never be another person. And in company cultures, it's the same. In companies, you can't just say, I want to be like Google. You can be Space Refinery with a touch of Google in you. Of course, you can get inspired by other companies and adapt some things, but those things will only work if they fit with who you are as a company. So if you talk about company cultures, the only way in our vision to create an amazing culture in a company is to create your own culture, starting from who you are and creating the habits, the artifacts, the values that fit with who you are as a company, with what you want to achieve, and how you are different from all the rest in the world.
And people will understand the culture differently also based on their role in the company. We actually run this little poll. We poll people on our page on Space Refinery, but also our CEO Katja, and we wanted to see what the team culture means to people. And the options were the vibe and energy, behavior and norms, perks and social time, and shared values. And interestingly, when it comes to our Space Refinery page, the most chosen option was the vibe and energy, and then would go the behavior and norms. Whereas when we shared it on Katja's profile, the CEO profile, who in her network has more of the senior level people, they would actually go more for behavior and norms, and then the vibe and energy and shared values still. So people didn't choose perks and social time. which is interesting. But the difference in the vision of, is it the vibe? Is it how we behave? Is it the norm? Was quite curious to me. So can you talk about that?
Yes, of course. When we want to describe company culture, because of course, if you search on Google, you ask any other AI bot what company culture is about, you get a lot of different definitions, and all of them are correct. But for us, we like to describe culture as a vibe, and a vibe is just an atmosphere, is a certain attraction that you have when you talk about a company. The easiest way to understand it is, for example, if you look at the festivals here in Belgium, you have Tomorrowland as a great example, but you also have Graspop, which is more the heavy metal kind of music. Those are two super good festivals, but they have a totally different vibe. They have totally different behaviors, other prices, other people wearing other clothes, other artists perform there. There are other definitions of luxury and so on. Both festivals are festivals, yes. Both festivals are quite good at what they do, but some people are attracted to Tomorrowland and other people are attracted to other festivals. And exactly with companies, it's exactly the same. All companies have a certain vibe that attracts people, that attracts customers, and sometimes you just feel it when you walk in. I want to be here or I don't. And so it's a very absolute feeling. And so for us, it's also more, if you talk about company culture, we prefer also to talk about a vibe. But in that vibe, of course, there are certain behaviors and norms. In that vibe, there's, of course, also a set of values that are important. The vibe is for us, is everything together. Also the perks and the habits, but I found it a very interesting poll because we also hear those different definitions of company culture coming forward. We often have conversations where people define company culture as the company barbecue or the ski weekend we do every year or the after work drinks, and that is also culture, but it's not at the essence of what the culture is about.
And it also reminds me of what we discussed with the energies, and you were already saying that values are behaviors, but then sometimes the values, and what do they mean at all, and when do they stop being useful? Like the energies, the different things that are present in the company or are absent as well, define the culture and define how productive, efficient, and collaborative the company is. Can you talk a bit more to that?
When we look at company culture, when we look at that vibe, we always say in that vibe there you need some dynamics. You need to get some movement in that vibe. And so you need different energies in order to create that movement. When you look at nature, for example, you have the different seasons in nature that they all have a different energy, but they're all needed in order to create an ecosystem that keeps working. And actually, if we look at companies, we can also look at a company as a certain system. And a company also needs certain energies, going from innovation, going to passion. We need an energy for let the trust come out, etc., etc. And it's very important that when you create a set of values, because the goal to create values is most of the time to create a certain behavior in your company, because that is what values do. They create a sort of truth on what is okay and what is not okay here, what is the behavior we need in order to achieve our goals, in order to succeed. And so you have to make sure that the values you create, that they cover the different energies you need to keep the dynamic going in your culture. And what we often see is that companies create value sets, that they're often all in the same corner or in the same 2-3 energies. And what lacks sometimes is just taking the time to look at those values and ask yourself, yeah, but what does it mean when we want to apply that value in another situation, etc., etc.
I wonder what you mean by, let's say, we have passion, we have innovation, we have structure, but then who does it come from? Is it we need to have, let's say, the leader needs to see the team and they're like, okay, this person is particularly good at this. Is it about distributing the resource, but resource not in a human resource way, but more like resources that the company has at its disposal, right? The talents, those kind of energies, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, for me, it's not necessary that everybody has all the energies. That's not possible. But as an individual, also, we all have our preferences. There are people that like more structure. There are other people that like more freedom. There are people that need a lot of trust, others have a great set of passion, and so on. So we are all different. And I think the most important invitation to companies is to create a sort of balance in the whole company at first, but also, of course, on a team level. You also need, if you want effective and productive teams, you need a sort of balance. If you only have salespeople in your team, then you'll sell probably a lot, but nothing gets done because you don't have the people that will actually create the office spaces or the products or whatever.
Yeah.
So you need a balance. And the invitation with those energies is also, what is the exact balance you need for your company? Because if you want to create something that is sustainable, and that's what we believe, that if companies want to grow, they need a sustainable company culture, not one that is very effective on a short term, because then it won't last. So you need something that can stay alive for a long period of time. Often you see it in companies or in teams that there's a high energy on something, and then after 1.5 year, everybody is tired or the energy is gone, and then everything stops. So the key is to create a set of values that keep those different energies in balance, just as in nature. In nature, if we only had 4 springs, we would say, oh, wow, what wonderful colors and all new flowers all the time. Of course, but then we will never have the summer that makes those trees grow exponentially. We will never have the winter where everything that we don't need anymore goes away. So you need everything, and everything is needed in balance with each other.
And how do we implement those? Now we have, let's say, the values that we believe in. How do we now actually act on them? Is it someone specific? Is it the responsibility of someone specific? Is it the whole team? How does it work?
One thing that is for sure is that, of course, if you look at a company, then one of the most important people when we talk about company culture are the leaders, because they are very close to the core of the organization. They most of the time define where we're going, what we're doing, how we're going to do it. If you talk about company culture, it's also a big responsibility of them to define exactly where we are going, how we are going to do it, which values we find important, but not only to say it, but also to give the good example. It's not so hard to create a set of values and put it on the wall. It's much more difficult to act on it every day, in every moment, and in every situation. So I think that's a very big part. Leading by example, that's one thing, but next to it, it's of course the responsibility of everybody in the team, in the organization, to translate those values in his or her everyday situation. What does it mean when I pick up the phone? What does it mean when a client gets angry at me? What does it mean when our budget is low and we still need to do something, or when the deadline approaches and we don't have much time anymore? So in all those different situations, we need to be able to translate those values. And that are exercises that we often do together with teams, together with leaders in teams, because the more you make your values tangible, the easier it becomes to talk to people based on the values.
And the interesting thing also happens maybe in the minds of the leaders often is then when you grow, you will have to have new people. How do you replicate that culture that you began with or you built, right? And you want to make sure that soul of the company is preserved. And it might feel like it's quite impossible to keep it when you have more layers of like reporting, responsibilities, some people are fired, some people are hired, some people are promoted. How can companies, the whole team, preserve the culture, or does it need to evolve, or is there something else that is at play in those situations?
Yeah, there are different levels that you have to go through when you grow as a company. At the beginning, it's most of the time the founder's energy that defines the culture. When you're a small team, you're 5, 10, maybe 15 people, then it's most of the time it's just the energy of the founder that determines what the culture is. But at a certain time, when you pass those 15 people or 20 people, depends, the founder isn't able anymore to do everything himself or herself. And the focus changes because they have to work more on growing the company, or they don't have the time to take everything in their own hands. And so they start building a structure. They start hiring some people to help them. And that's the moment where actually you have to translate the culture as well. You have to make sure you're able to download the culture from the head of the founder, as you can say, and put it into a certain structure so the culture can exist on itself in the company. And the founder will still be the biggest influence of that culture and still needs to feed it and it still needs to inspire the bunch of people. But more and more, the culture and the founder get separated. And that's the essential key that you have to turn at that point in order to make sure that the culture can stay the same. It won't always stay the same because the form also changes when you have 5 or 10 people or you have 100 people. Of course, there's a difference. And the company spreads more literally. People are further away from the core of the company. We are not able anymore to have lunch all together at the same table, etc. So you will need to install certain habits, certain structures in order to keep the connection alive, in order to keep the inspiration alive, in order to have communication work in a good way. So it evolves and it keeps evolving as you grow bigger. But the basic elements don't change because you also always have a certain core. And if you feed that core, you create a certain vibe. And when the company grows bigger, it's not only the founder's core, it's a leadership's vibe. But those leaders have their own teams, and in their own teams, they create another vibe, etc., etc. That's the way it expands, or it keeps expanding when you grow. But there's a slight difference when what you see nowadays is that a lot of companies grow with mergers and acquisitions. So they buy other companies. And there you have another approach because you buy another culture and then you have to decide what are we going to do with it. Or you can say we keep those two companies separated and they all have their own culture. But most of the time, one company culture takes over the other one. If things are communicated well, and if everybody acts on it, then you can really have a good integration of one culture into another. What we see often in day-to-day situations is that when you do a merger or an acquisition, often the communication around it is not very clear because we want to call it a partnership because it looks better. And most of the time, the old leader stays on board for quite a time in order to do a good transformation of all the information. And that are all symptoms that sometimes make it diffuse on how actually are we going to bring those two together. So that's where often we see you have some integration problems. People don't understand it anymore. They feel left out. They don't feel the connection. And then when an opportunity comes along, they go to another company.
And there are many things that are happening, not only internally to the teams, but also externally. There are all the changes that we see in the world as well that the leaders and the teams need to adapt, namely the hybrid work, which is, as we know, is here to stay. And now the whole reason of coming to the physical workspace, or in general for people to collaborate, and where we can see challenges as well, is the collaboration. People want to come physically to meet with people, to collaborate, to solve some issues or problems or find solutions faster. They want that social time, right? They want that just face-to-face, peer-to-peer time, maybe a bit of like bragging or a bit of nagging, a bit of this and that, just like the normal human monkey stuff that we do is for us to be able to collaborate because we're social species. And then the hybrid is flipping it all on its head, and many people in companies don't even know what it means. It's this many days, is it these new tools, is it all of the things that are just new and different. And while you might feel very productive and efficient, or maybe not, it really depends on also on your home office setup and just how you are used to working, and also the profession that you have, right? Some people are thriving in that kind of isolation or that solo work, and some people really need to be productive with other people. So we talk a lot about the hybrid in our work, and also about intentional hybrid, the hybrid that supports all those aspects. So not only the things that people need to do their best work practically, certain setups, certain tools, certain rooms and spaces like meeting rooms and collaborative spaces, but also just the whole culture behind it, supporting your people. When this kind of divide happens, when especially a lot of people also work remotely, right? Remotely even from different countries. So how do we make sure that the culture stays, or does it evolve? What is going on there?
A lot of information together. First, for starters, I love hybrid culture. I love working hybrid myself. It gives me a lot of freedom, but I'm not against or for one form or another. It's just, as you say, the right place for the right work. I think that's my basic conviction on hybrid working. And so I believe in the importance of offices. An office has the amazing opportunity to create a certain vibe and bring people together. And as you say, create those meaningful connections that we as a species need. When you have a vehicle like an office, it's quite easy to create a vibe. If you create the right circumstances, you have the right space, you have the right things you need, like coffee or a vibrant environment, then it's easy to create a good atmosphere. It's easy to create a culture where some things are clear. But when you take all those things away and you just sit behind a screen at home, it's much more difficult. A lot of companies don't take the time to really understand that. You take away a lot of things, but you still expect the same. While we do not invest in, okay, how are we going to translate our culture? How we are going to translate our habits, our rituals into a digital version. It is possible. We have companies that work fully remote from all places in the world that work perfectly together as a team. So it's not a thing that it's not possible, but behind lies somewhere sometimes a fear in companies. A lot of leaders have the conviction that when people work at home that they're not productive. Maybe it's true, I don't know, but I also see a lot of people that work at the office that are not productive as well. So it's not a matter of the location, it's a matter of the attitude that is behind the location. And that is culture again. What makes that people are not productive? What do they need? Why aren't they motivated? And I think that is the thing that you have to look further into. And also as a leader, sometimes your fear that you don't control the things takes over, and maybe you think, oh, if everybody comes to the office, then at least I can look if they're working or not. That's not really the company you want to create. That's not the leader you want to be. So I think that what really is needed is, okay, again, you start from the core. Who are we as a company? What is the vibe that we want to see in our company? And how can we translate that vibe into hybrid working? And what in smaller companies is that one way or another, for them, it's easier to translate into hybrid versions. Why? Because they're very close to each other, and if there's a problem, they just address it. But when you get into a big corporate situation, you have all those different communication lines, you have all those different rules, and it's sometimes difficult for people to understand how it works exactly, but also it's sometimes easy to hide in all the space there is. The invitation, I think, for bigger organizations is really to take the time and specify exactly, based on the essence of who they are as a company, what their expectations are, what is the context in which we want to work, what are the responsibilities, and speak freely about it and open about it, and try not to start from not trusting each other, but try to start from what is the situation we would actually love to see. And I think that's a totally different approach.
It's like an exercise, like a takeaway that we can already give, the first one, in terms of practical application and tool, right? To do a little inventory of what's going on, what could be better, what you would like to be better, and why as well is probably important. I hear this idea of improvement and change at every step as well, because you were saying that the culture is scalable. It can be scalable based on those values and the energies as well, and it will be a fractal, right? You can see it go zooming in and zooming out if it's done right. But then also it can't be just let on its own. It needs to be changing, it needs to be maybe adapting. You need to see what works now, what doesn't work. And would there be some other practical things in terms of implementation, or in terms of maybe some symptoms as well of when things are not working? How do you know, especially when you start looking at culture?
the biggest advice I always gave when we talk about culture is actually culture is all about awareness. And when you are aware of your own behavior, but also if you are aware of the culture of the company, if you really dare to say how things are really going, when all of that is clear, then you can start moving into the right direction. What is difficult about it is that once you're in a certain culture, it's really difficult to see the truth sometimes. You adapt really fast. You can see when new people come in, often the first month, maybe the second month, a little bit, they ask questions that you find sometimes stupid or don't understand, but they just have a totally different view and they want to understand why things are going the way they are going. And I always make the comparison with water. If you're standing next to a pool, you have no difficulty seeing the water. But if you jump into the water and you're underneath the water and you try to look, you can't see the water. And with culture, it's exactly the same. So if you're in a culture, it's very difficult to be aware of what exactly the culture is. So it's one of the things we do at first with companies is to help give them a broader view on this is how you're working today. This is what you are doing. And because of this, yeah, these problems arise, or that's why these things don't work, although you're trying and you're yelling and you're inspiring people to go harder and further and faster, but it's not working. And it's because of this. So unraveling all those things that you don't understand in your company, putting it on a table, seeing the things as they really are is a big first step in order to move forward. And it's, again, it's not different from how we as a people act. It's only when I realize that I have certain behaviors that hold me back from growing in certain parts of my life. Only after the awareness about it, I can really change things, or I can choose not to change and keep bumping into the same problem. And that's also a difficulty we have as humans. But that's really what culture is about. So creating that awareness, we always talk about downloading your current culture. And then you can see, okay, I am happy with what I see and I want to keep feeding it, keep growing it. Or you can see a culture, you can be aware of the culture. And say, that's not what we wanted. That's not what is going to help us reach our goals. So we have to adapt. We have to change our culture. And so we're going to introduce some new things, maybe get out some of the things that we don't need anymore in order to create a new reality. That's the behavior. And actually, the fact that you're giving energy to your culture is already a very big step, because whether you like it or not, you have a culture. But there's also another law in life that say whatever you give energy will grow. And if you are aware of your culture and you look at your culture, you put energy in your culture, it will grow. But it will only grow what you feed. So if you feed the assumptions, if you feed the fears, if you feed the habits that won't bring you to your goal, then you won't move towards where you want to go. So the awareness is always the key. And the awareness will give you insight on the things that you see happening in company cultures. For example, the we-they gap is some things you see often between management and between the rest of the organizations, that there's a gap because they don't understand each other, or certain teams that talk about each other, not with each other. You can also see sometimes as a leader, if you have some small frustrations, it is also an indication that maybe things are not completely going the way as you wanted. Because, for example, sometimes I hear leaders saying, yeah, it's 4 o'clock and they're all going home already. Or when I ask something, I always have to ask it 3 times before they do something for me. And these are small frustrations that come out every day in a small situation that are very subtle, but actually they also shout and they say, hey, there's something that is not in line with what is your view on what you want to see. And if you keep ignoring those things, because as people, we like to ignore those signals. We know that we maybe have to take on that project and go through that hard time in order to change things. And we know we have to start a discussion with Frank about his behavior, but he's the best sales we got and I really don't want to lose him. And we know that the two people don't get along, but yeah, I don't want to stand in between him. I don't want to look like a bad leader, etc., etc. So we create all kinds of excuses to look away from the things that maybe are already going on. And that's not bad. That's just being human. But at some point, you have to take a responsibility. You have to dare and say, okay, let's take a look at what is really there. And you also know, as humans, sometimes you neglect some things, and in your head they keep growing and they keep getting worse and worse and worse just because you don't take them on.
Yeah.
So when you do, you often see that it's not a big thing. It's just, again, normal human behavior. Start a conversation, take a decision, etc., etc. And then if you do that, you move forward.
I love all these points, and they're very practical, very specific, applicable to many different cultures from 5 to 1,000 people. That is absolutely amazing. And thank you so much. This is already such a beautiful conversation, and it flew by. I wanted to ask you, are there some resources that you offer to the companies that they can just take a look and download something to read through, or is there something else that you would like to share?
Of course, they should listen to this podcast once a week, at least. No, I think there's a lot of inspiration about company culture online to find it. That's not so difficult. Our specific view on company culture and how we look at it, you can find information about that on our website. We also have an ebook on our website that you can download to get a little bit of insight on how we look at company culture and how we address it and how we look at nature often, because it's a very good comparison. And furthermore, I think if you are inspired by what I'm saying, you can follow me on LinkedIn, of course, or what we often do is do inspiration workshops, keynotes at companies, just to raise the awareness on what company culture is about. You don't have to jump into a big change project immediately, but sometimes just tickling the company on, hey, maybe we should take the time to look at it and start a discussion, share opinions. And when we do that, we often see that there's a conversation starting, and there are 2-3 decisions that are made that immediately have an impact on a company culture, just because all those things that happen all are already almost ready to be done. It's just some event that needs to bring them together, and some spark that needs to be thrown into that situation, and bam, we're off and we're going. And I think that's what we try to do in companies, is to inspire and motivate, help, support leaders and organizations to dare to take the step and build a company with the culture that they really desire, because that is the invitation. And entrepreneurs that start a company and at certain point feel them as a slave of their own company. That's not the point. That's not why you started. And the invitation is to take it on and take your responsibility and build a company you would like to see. It's your company. Often as a leader, you have the responsibility. Maybe you're not the only shareholder. Okay. A lot of youngsters always talk about YOLO, you only live once, but actually it's the same. It's the same also with this. What holds you back from bringing your energy as a leader to this company and create what you think that is needed to boost that company to the top?
Thank you, Tim. That's very valuable. We will share all those resources in the description of this podcast, wherever it is that you're listening or watching it. And yeah, thank you for all the insights. So looking forward to learning more from you, maybe in other editions of this podcast as well.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.